Hi, my name's Dave Adams and welcome to Nerds of Wisdom. I want to talk about Spider-Man Far From Home, but before I do, you might notice that it's a little bit different. The format's a little bit different. Can't take full credit for it. I am stealing ideas from Grace Randolph. I did this, actually, this is the second time I've filmed this. The first time I did it, I went, it just wasn't really, I wasn't feeling it. It wasn't going the way I was hoping. It wasn't doing what I wanted. And I really wanted to try a few different things. And that meant that I actually wanted to try and see why what Grace does works. So I'm effectively giving her format a go with full acknowledgement to her, with the hope that I might learn some things and be able to take it away and develop it a little bit and make it more my own. Or just realize why it works and move on. Whatever. But I do know that she does it better. I was hoping to do this live. I was hoping to do a live event, but there was a couple of things. Firstly, I couldn't work out the screen within screen, and then I couldn't work out, my internet in the area is going really slowly at the moment, so it just wasn't going to work. With that said, so go check out Beyond the Trailer, because Grace does a great job, and she's been in the industry for years and she is wonderful at her work. So full props to Grace. That said, we are talking about Spider-Man Far From Home, so I was really hoping to sort of get into some of the nitty-gritty and just have a bit of a discussion about some of it. Just chill, relax, talk about some things. Now, I will say this right now. There are spoilers. So if you haven't seen the film, pause this, step away right now, and go see the film before I start telling you things like Mysterio is really a villain, Nick Fury is actually a Skrull, and Spider-Man's identity gets revealed at the end. Before I ruin stuff like that for you, click away and go see the film first. With that said, let's jump on in, shall we? Oh, the feels of this film. Look, I'm going to say overall, I really enjoyed Spider-Man. I think they captured what a good Spider-Man story is, and just watching it, it wasn't world-ending, even though what I love is that they tried to create the threat of world-ending, but the whole time you're in on the idea that this isn't actually a world-ending situation. It's not going to ruin the world. But we know that our hero has to stop him before he actually enacts his plan, and everyone falls in love with him. Which in some sense he's not so successful with, but I really like the idea of here's another world-ending event, an Avengers level style event that isn't actually an Avengers style level event at all. So in many respects you sort of have the feel of this is big without it actually being that big a deal. But there is still a threat there, and this is what I love about it. It's a good Spider-Man film. There's enough threat for Spider-Man. There's enough of a threat to his neighborhood, to his friends, and this film really brings it together nicely. What I like about Spider-Man's storylines, and why I think this one's a good one, is it captures that idea of, Peter gets this greatest gift ever, and the greatest gift ever keeps screwing up his life. Because I think a good Spider-Man film is actually a good Peter Parker film. So really we get the sense of this is actually a Peter Parker story, and Spider-Man is actually ruining his life for him in many levels. Like he's trying to hold this balance together. And he's always talking about with great power comes great responsibility. Well, we get a sense of that. He's trying to have a normal life, and these responsibilities keep caving in. And I guess the question is, can Peter have this responsibility and still have his normal life? And this is what the film is really trying to answer. I think it really works because it takes the original movie, the earlier movie, and it actually just intensifies everything. So it's actually, for me, it's the same problem that Peter's facing. Peter goes through this, has been through this angst before, but he went through it on a much lower level. This time everything's on it stepped up. Now he's looking at being the next Iron Man. Is he taking up the mantle of being the leader of the Avengers? All these things. Now they're way bigger. Like, in fact, he rejects that at the end of the first film because he's not ready for that responsibility. And now he's kind of forced into a position where he has to really consider that more seriously. So I like that. But I like that this is really, they're the impacts of Spider-Man on the life of Peter Parker, who's just trying to get a date. He's going through that whole teenage angst of trying to tell the girl that he loves her. And you follow that on, and that's what I think makes a good Spider-Man story. it's a Peter Parker story, and Spider-Man keeps screwing up Peter Parker's life. So, that's what I like about this film. I do like that this is effectively Peter Parker going through some teenage angst, lots of teenage angst, but it's done well, and it doesn't linger. Really well done. Now, is this a homage? Yes, it is definitely a homage. It's got all of the kudos to the Avengers, and of course to Iron Man, his big hero. Now, the thing I think which works really well is this film effectively is an epilogue. It is the epilogue to the MCU as we know it. Now, we can talk about it as the end of Phase 3. I like to think of it really as the finishing up and the wrapping up of the universe to date, which I think is really Stage 1, which is probably not the language they use, but really, this is all of the original cast. This is it talks about them. You get them mentioned. There's people in the background. You get all of the glue in the background. You get Nick Fury, Maria Hill. All these people are back, and really, this is trying to sum up that story. It's trying to sum up life after the click. And I think it's done really well. In fact, one of the things I said is that it was a good epilogue to Endgame, and it's a great close to Phase 3. It's just finishing off those storylines of the first Avengers. In fact, my friend Ricky actually says that what's really interesting for him is that Uncle Ben is replaced by Stark in these stories. So, it's Uncle Ben who's his motivation through all of the other Spider-Mans, but here we really get a sense that maybe Tony Stark is that motivation now. And the whole time it's really taking a question of, it's actually exploring Stark's legacy. Now, while I've said already that it's a good Peter Parker film, I think it's interesting that it's also exploring Stark's legacy. What is the actual legacy of Tony Stark? Is it Spider-Man? Is Spider-Man Tony's legacy? Is the Avengers Tony's legacy? And we see all these positive things coming out for Spider-Man. Spider-Man's really fixated on all these positives, but actually the villains are all motivated by Tony Stark still as well. They are an end product of Tony Stark's legacy. His lack of interest in people, his sort of egotistical megalomania at times. They're the personification of everything that was wrong with Tony Stark. And Spider-Man is really there trying to carry the burden of everything that was good about Tony Stark. And we see all the good, all the documentaries that he's seen. Everyone sees the good, but they don't see the impact that he had fully. And so the real question, I think, is what was Tony Stark's legacy? And I think we get to explore that some parts. And really it's that nice moment at the end when they're on the plane and Happy is talking to Peter Parker, and he said, you don't really know the true Tony. There's the hype, there's the angst, the problems, but it's when you're down in the dumps, when you're in the worst of the worst, what do you do? And we see the true legacy of Tony coming through in Spider-Man's decision to get up and keep fighting, keep working hard, keep thinking. So I thought that was really good. It was actually, as much as it's a nice Peter Parker story trying to fall in love with a girl, I like that it was one of the subplots to this is actually the exploration of Stark's legacy. So it is a really good homage to the Avengers. I think it's a good homage to Tony Stark, and I think it's a great epilogue to Endgame and a great closing out of Phase 3 of Marvel Universe. Now, of course, this is the crux of the story, Peter and MJ, and both actors do an amazing job. I really like Tom Holland as both Spider-Man and Peter Parker. I loved Tobey Maguire for that. I thought Tobey brought both. It's one of the reasons I loved him. And I really liked his Peter Parker in particular. But I thought he was much stronger on the Peter Parker than on the Spider-Man, even though he totally nails it. He really does. I have no qualms with Tobey Maguire. But then, of course, what's his name? Andrews. Andrews. It's not coming to me right now. His Spider-Man, not so much. Wasn't a big fan of either of his. But Tom Holland, I was really concerned about I thought maybe he'd do a good Peter Parker, but maybe not a good Spider-Man. I think he's proven to me that he can do both really well. And one of the things I really like is I have really enjoyed his development with MJ. as well as all his friends too. The thing I think I like about this story is that MJ is a character getting fleshed out in these stories as well. Whereas in the previous films, MJ or even Gwen, I think Kirsten Dunst sort of said, you get sick of spending your time on set just screaming out, "Spider-Man, save me, help me," and screaming at the top of your lungs. That doesn't happen with the MJ in this film. She's a real character. She's got real depth. They explore her character, and in the end, when it comes to the fight scene, when it comes to the big crux, he's not trying to rescue her, though he's trying to rescue her. But it's not just about trying to rescue her, it's about trying to stop all the targets getting destroyed, including MJ. And MJ actually has a pretty key function in trying to save the lives of other kids on the bus. She takes a bit of the lead. She's gutsy. She's got real spunk. And the thing I really liked about her development in this film was that she's not just this... In the first film, I thought, she was a bit like this moody, gothy girl, and it was just angsty teenager crap. But I really liked how they broke her down a little bit in this film. Oh, right, she admits to, I say these things because to cover up what I'm really thinking or really feeling. And she does get to some of those subtexts sometimes. So the good part of a story is what's said in between the lines. Sometimes she says it out loud, and that's a good moment for her to convey that honesty. But there's a lot of subtext where she's actually, it's not just that she's saying, "Oh, well, actually, I'm joking," or "It's okay," or "I really like that you think I look nice." It's more that you can see her trying to deflect, but then trying to be honest, and that's not easy for her. And so I like that subtext. And of course, the actress whose name I'm not going to try and say because I haven't fully learned it, she does a great job. Apparently, she's a really big musician, and she's done heaps of things, actually. She's done a few things that I've seen her in. Currently in Euphoria. I want to say it's like Zenira or something, but it's not her actual name. It's like her pseudonym or nom de plume. But she's really great actress. I like how they're developing the character. I like that the friends have an actual friend role to play and that they matter in these stories. So I think that the Peter MJ storyline is the crux of the story. I think it's developed well. But let's move on. Let's talk about Mysterio. Jake Gyllenhaal killed it. Absolutely nailed his role. Just, look, you can say what you will. I didn't really know what to think. I thought when I heard Mysterio was going to be in the Spider-Man, they didn't say villain, they said in Spider-Man. I was like, really? You want to go with Mysterio? The guy with a fishbowl on his head? It wasn't really the best. It wasn't the best sales pitch for me. But look, Jake Gyllenhaal looked great in the suit. When I saw the trailer, I was impressed. I thought, this looked great. So I was keen for what was going to happen. And of course, Mysterio has... the only big problem I had was actually with the film was with Mysterio. Even though I loved Jake's role, I loved the way he portrayed him, I loved the costuming, I loved the way they brought the whole illusion thing to life through all the drones. That was really clever thinking, really clever writing. But Mysterio also does carry some of the weaker moments of the film for me. Conceptualization was cool, concept was good, but he was a bit too cartoony at times still. And I think part of that is that he has the worst exposition scene ever. And I mean, like, look at this. It really, I watched it going, it's that Gaston moment where Gaston gets up and he's giving the toast, and then he bursts into song and explains essentially why he's a villain. It's not that he's saying he's a villain, it's just that you realize the guy's a jerk. And that's kind of what happens here. The whole illusion comes down. They're in the bar. He gets up and they're going, give us a toast. And he's like, oh no, I don't want to give you a toast. And then immediately goes, oh, all right. And it's this really cartoony, takes the beer and swishes around and then gives this several minute long, maybe it wasn't several minutes, maybe it just felt like several minutes, but this exposition of stuff that I had already worked out for the most part. I did that. Now, let me just say, I thought it was bad exposition, but I thought the exposition itself was a good plot idea. Like, I liked the idea of these characters who were connected to previous Marvel storylines, because again, bringing it all to a conclusion, like linking it all together, looking at Stark's legacy. I liked how it all linked together, and these people were from films that we'd seen. You know, they got chewed out because of Stark. They lost their job because of Stark. Stark made fun of their technology. Genius work. Loved it. Really clever stuff. So really keen on that. I thought that was a really great idea. Totally bought it. But too cartoony, too campy. It did throw me back into thinking of him as a cartoon character. But at the same time, it was all right. You know, that's one minor chink in the armor. I think it's a pretty safe film if that's my major criticism of it. And that probably is my major criticism of it. The other characters behind the scenes, Nick Fury, Maria Hill, it was great to see them back. And what's nice, they don't steal the show. They don't steal the show. They just simply provide motivation, and they don't overpower, but they play their part. And I thought their part was good. It was meaningful. It was useful. It was worthwhile. It was excellent to see. And of course, the Skrulls post-credit scheme where we get the double bluff, where they're actually not Nick Fury and Maria Hill, they're Skrulls, and Nick Fury is on an alien planet. What does that mean? Well, it could mean the beginning of Skrull invasion. As my friend Ricky points out, we don't have all the pieces for that yet, but then it's the MCU. Maybe we don't need all the pieces. Maybe we don't need the full Illuminati. We don't need Reed Richards and all the others. But, you know, they've got a whole nother phase to work on it. I think it might be a good starting point with the Skrull invasion. I would love to see the Skrulls fleshed out more. I'd love to see them as more than just refugees, because, quite frankly, the Skrulls can be a very scary threat, and they are in the comics. I'm keen to see Super Skrull. That would mean bringing back the Fantastic Four, but I want to see Skrulls with powers, and they can have powers and they can develop cool stuff. I want to see Skrulls with powers. So yeah, keen to see more Skrulls, but I'm also keen to see some Kree development. As I mentioned it, I was really keen in what's her name? After that description, how could you not realise I was talking about Captain Marvel? So Captain Marvel had Kree, and it almost had developed. Like, you got to see the Kree homeworld. I was looking for a more fleshed out characterization of the Kree. Haven't actually gotten that yet. In fact, Captain Marvel sort of hinted at it and then pulled the rug out of my feet and left me feeling a bit high and dry. So, but anyway, not so bad, but I'm keen to see that develop a little bit more. Even though my ultimate theory is that Phase 2 is not about Skrull Secret Invasion. It is, in fact, probably about the multiverses collapsing in on themselves because of the actions of the Avengers, which would be a nice link together for them all. However, I can go into that more another time. Last 10 minutes of the film, it was great to see J. Jonah Jameson coming up with what was effectively Alex Jones' InfoWars. Gosh, that was I laughed out loud at that. When I saw him come up, I went, they've done the Daily Bugle. The Bugle now is InfoWars. It was, and there's J. Jonah Jameson leading the charge. It was interesting to see J.K. Simmons. I'm scratching my head. I'm trying to think of anyone else who has actually survived a whole relaunch of the franchise. In fact, 2 relaunches to still be in the same character role. It's like they just teleport him over. But how could you not? He's so good as J. Jonah Jameson. He is the bomb. Like, I couldn't think of anyone else who would do it as well. But to bring him over, that was impressive. So good to see him. Good to see the InfoWars reference. It was very funny. Had a good laugh at that. And the reveal of Spider-Man's identity. Interesting plot development. Not as big as I think some people are making it out. I actually think you can get around it quite easily. And it's not like Spider-Man hasn't had his identity revealed before and had to fend off charges. Had to have, tried to convince the public that it's not really him. But I do like seeing him cast back into the villain role again. And one of the things is that whole Batman thing. Sometimes Spider-Man storylines work best when Spider-Man is seen as the villain by New York, because he's so desperate to be the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and to see him be the villain is a big deal. So with that said, that brings me to the end of Spider-Man. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of the film? Why don't you put your thoughts down below? I'd love to hear them. And also, give me some feedback on what you think of this style of editing and putting things together. Until next time, my name's Dave Adams, and you've been watching Nerds of Wisdom.